attempt to snatch a grid Papa Uniform 259er, 119er, break. Enemy is unaware of our presence at this time, over. Solid copy. Hitman 2.
Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Ben Powers coming at you from the Commander's Voice. My guest tonight is Mr. John Fenzel. John is the CEO of the World War II Foundation. We've previously had the president of the foundation on the show and talking about the work that they do in support of bringing World War II education and information to a new generation of students. So, John, welcome.
Oh, it's great to be here with you, Ben. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to have you on the show, John. Friend of the show, George Luz, who I will,
Yeah.
promote to the end of
Oh, yeah.
my days, said, "Hey, Ben, you got to have John on the show. He's got some interesting stuff to talk about. The World War II Foundation's doing some amazing things." And I thought with the 80th anniversary of the Normandy invasion right around the corner, I know you guys are hip deep in preparations for that. It would be the right time to have you on. So with that being said, and knowing that your time is valuable, let's jump right into it. So the first thing I'd like to ask, John, is I know that you were a career military officer. So could you briefly summarize that career to give the audience a little context about where you're coming from?
Yeah, as we were talking about just before we all pressed record on this, Ben, for me, it was a great ride. I mean, I spent 30 years in our Army. I was a Special Forces guy, a Green Beret for those 30 years. And, I served as a military assistant to the Secretary of Defense, and then also as a special assistant to the Vice President of the United States. I was a White House fellow during the Clinton Bush administrations as well. So, and of course, that was the time also when 9/11 happened. So, my roles kind of they extended from Desert Shield and Desert Storm all the way to the Balkans, and during the War on Terrorism as well. I spent a lot of time working in the White House, developing what we now call the color-coded alert system, the Homeland Security Advisory System, after 9/11. So it was just a tremendous experience all the way around, and as I mentioned to you, it's kind of like from the E-ring to the West Wing, and so I got the full experience.
Very cool. Now, you also mentioned that early in your career, you were able to spend some time in Germany during the Cold War. And you would have been about 10 years into your career about the time that the Army was having a kind of a big service-wide acknowledgement of the 50th anniversary of World War II. So did you get exposure to the Army's history or the history of World War II in general, either during your time in Germany or when those celebrations were a big thing, like the 50th anniversary of Normandy and that kind of stuff back in the early 90s?
Yeah, it was one of the reasons that I think one of the kind of the foundational reasons that I really became interested in in World War II is because, in my first unit in the Army, our battalion commander was a Vietnam veteran. I still remember, it was Lieutenant Colonel Lester C. Butch Stearns, and he said, "Get on the bus. We're going north." And where we ended up going was to Bastogne and to Luxembourg, and in there we got a really good view of the Battle of the Bulge. And for me, that just opened up all the doors, and I just realized, from these experiences, going to these places, having that kind of experiential learning experience, you can apply a lot of those lessons that you learn on the ground to your own life and in your own situation today. And I think, Ben, that's where it all began for me, and I was just a young lieutenant. I'm sure you can relate. When you're kind of in those formative years, those experiences matter.
Oh, very much so, very much so. And that kind of brings us to the mission of the World War II Foundation. So could you summarize for the audience what the World War II Foundation is all about? And then I've got a follow-on question tied to that.
Yeah, we've got kind of a diverse a diverse mission, but it's also focused in that we're all about preserving the stories of the World War II generation and educating future generations about the sacrifices. And the way that we do that is we primarily produce documentary films. That's kind of our sweet spot right there. We also have educational programs. We have a museum. We have digital content, and we're improving it every single day. So that's really ultimately what what we're all about. We're also in the process right now of creating a multidisciplinary integrated curriculum for high school kids, which we're really excited about. So there's lots of different things. One of the things that we know, though, is that we have to go where these kids live. So it's not just our generation. It's how do you instill all of this and all these experiences within the younger generations. And for them, it's all about, can you swipe a screen? Can you see things through virtual reality? Can you do things, in kind of these digital spaces? And so that's what we do. It's our mission is really about making the lessons and the character and the values of the greatest generation in World War II readily accessible and importantly relevant as well.
No, and that's a perfect setup for the follow-on question.
Yeah.
So the idea that we all can learn something from the experiences of those who went before, is that what's driving this, or is the foundation's mission more driven from the standpoint that World War II, even in the best curriculum in a middle school or high school, is by necessity going to receive a cursory examination at best, and you want to provide a more in-depth curriculum or a more in-depth look so the achievements of the greatest generation aren't forgotten? Or is it more a matter of, hey, people pretty much know about World War II, but let's provide them with a lens through which they can understand how the lessons that the greatest generation went through can be applied to their own lives? Or is it a hybrid of both of those things? Or am I completely missing the mark?
No, I think, actually, I was just going to say yes. That's the answer. All those, because it really is a hybrid of all those things. When you look at what really sets us apart, what differentiates the World War II Foundation from other museums, other monuments, other memorials, there's lots of those. And we know that. And they do incredible work. I mean, we, on a routine basis, are trying to partner with all these organizations. And I tell all of their CEOs, look, we're a lot stronger together than we are apart. And we have a much greater voice and much greater impact if we're able to work together. A lot of times what you find out with museums and also with monuments is that their focus is necessarily kind of retrospective, where ours is prospective. So we take the history and and what we're really primarily concerned about is how to make that readily accessible, readily relevant to that generation. All generations learn differently. We know that. So you have to go where those people are, whether they're 90 years old or whether, they're 10 years old. What is going to resonate with them? And one of the things that I really believe is that one of the most profound ways of learning is through experiential learning. If you're able to go to those places, and if you can't go to those places, can we try to put you there through our documentary films? Can we put you there through VR? Can we put you there through a lecture? On the spot, can you do that? It's hard for us to do that here in the United States because World War II was fought in the Pacific and in the Atlantic areas in the theaters. So there's a challenge in doing this, but we use technology to be able and in our documentary films to be able to bring people forward and be able to understand kind of how those lessons apply to them.
No, that's fantastic. So before I get too much further into the mission and how the World War II Foundation executes its mission, in addition to your experience as a soldier and that first battalion commander who brought you to Bastogne, do you have any familial connections to World War II, like so many of us do? Or
I do. It's interesting because my father and my grandfather ran a car dealership. They also had a Texaco station right there. It was a Chrysler dealership. My experience with World War II started with those customers, those customers who are across the counter and just listening to their stories. It was something that I wish I would have paid more attention to, quite honestly, today. But I did pay attention. I knew their names and they, if you think about it, back then, they were our scoutmasters, they were our teachers, they were the customers, they were the people, that were telling the stories, and they were master storytellers. Some of them didn't want to talk about their World War II experiences. A lot of them didn't, but you still got a very good idea of their character and their values. And so that was really kind of my first exposure. My dad was 9 years old when World War II started in Chicago. And then they moved to Hampshire, Illinois, and it was this kind of rural little town in northern Illinois. But you know what they had there was a German POW camp.
Oh, that's
He was the paper boy for that POW camp, and he got to know all of those German soldiers. And I'll tell you, he loved them and they loved him. They were all Africa Corps soldiers, and their boss was Rommel, so they loved Rommel, and they didn't like Hitler. But they were the ones who taught Dad English. They taught him mathematics. They taught him even Latin. So all those things, they became his mentors. And when they all were liberated, they gave him a plaque. I wish I had it with me, but it was very intricately carved. And when Dad was alive, he would always tell that story about his interaction with those POWs. Those are the stories that resonated with me. I heard them all my life, and that's really kind of what gave me my first exposure to World War II.
Oh wow, that is actually a really interesting
Yeah.
connection. I was not expecting one so close to home almost. So that's really cool. And to be able to, 16 million people served, plus you had so many more millions who are on the home front, and every family has those types of stories. So that in order to be able to collect those and present them in such a way that today's students can learn from them, that's got to be a very daunting task for the foundation.
It is, but it's not something, but it's something that we really take seriously. I mean, it is our mission. So, we have to find innovative ways to do it. And there's lots of things, my big concern is that we're losing these veterans right now at such a rapid clip. But the average age of a World War II veteran today is between 97 years old and 103. Definitely within 10 years, we'll have lost them all. And I think right now there are 119,000 on, that's an estimate that still survive, and we're losing about 300 a day.
Wow.
So
And
it's it's natural. I mean, I remember when we lost all of our World War I veterans, and I knew the second to the last surviving World War I veteran, and the last thing he told me as I left him, he's 107 years old, almost 108. He said, John, don't let them forget us.
wow.
So, and I know that the same is true amongst all of the World War II veterans that I've ever talked to, is that, just please don't let them forget us.
That
And
that
that's
is
our
a
mission. Yeah.
powerful mandate. And when you say 119,000, on the one hand, it's like, well, that's a pretty big number. That's a fair-sized city or a fair-sized town and or a relatively small city. But the flip side being 16 million people served, and we're down to, you know, less than 200,000. That tells you how many are gone, and that's just mind-blowing. But
That's
here
exactly
we
right.
are 80 years on, so time is inexorable. So we do understand that
Yeah.
not going to be able to hold all onto them all forever, but we can hold on to their stories. So how do you guys go about fulfilling your mission, choosing what stories to tell, being able to fund the projects? I mean, soup to nuts. I'm just fascinated with how you guys actually operate as a foundation.
Well, it's a great question, Ben, because, I would like to be able to tell you that we have, that everything is kind of set in stone, but we're a pretty fluid organization. And, Tim Gray, who, from my perspective, I can tell you, I think he's kind of like the Ken Burns of World War II, producers. He's just, he's a great historian, and he's been interested in World War II since he was 6 years old. I think he probably told you that
You sure
when
do.
he appeared on your podcast. And and he started collecting these artifacts as well. They are the core of our museum, the International World War II Museum in Rhode Island. And so, you know, but he has a very, very good grip on World War II, all dimensions of World War II, and he listens as well. He listens to stories, and he reads books. And if he reads a book, for instance, he'll say, this would be a great documentary film. For instance, we're in the process right now of probably around actually on September 10th, we're going to be premiering a film called My Dad's Secret War, and it's all about a gentleman who found out, that his father was in the OSS during World War II, and he never knew about it until he found
Wow.
literally a bread box full of all these secret things like a 45 and a, secret, credentials and, code words and, and it's just amazing. Well, so we did the documentary on that, and I was just up at the museum last month. And as I was going through it, I looked down and there's the bread box and there's the 45 and there's the code books and there's, all these things, so it's real. But oh, by the way, there's a book about it and there's a documentary about it now as well. And we're going to be releasing that, premiering that at the French Embassy on September 10th, and then it'll appear on all of the American public television stations. So you'll see it, and it's really just a compelling story. That's just kind of one way that we do it, and but it's a monumental effort. We actually go on location with an actual, whenever we can, with actual veterans to show us those places, to talk about them. We go and we interview them in their homes. And oftentimes, as we're leaving, a family member will say, what, that's the first time we've ever heard that story. And because Tim has a way of getting them to be able to talk about their experiences when they never previously could.
That is so cool. Now it's, we're kind of segueing from, the mission of the foundation and preserving history and the excitement of learning that your dad was an OSS agent kind of thing to, I want to get a little more prosaic though. How do you guys fund your operation? Do you guys write grants? Is it pure donation based only? Like, how can people help you guys achieve the goal of preserving this? That's what I'm really driving at. Not only how do you fund, but how can people help you fund?
Yeah, it's all of those things. It's what our challenge right now is. Typically the way that we would fund our documentaries is through corporations that really have a connection to World War II, really understand that connection and understand the value of the greatest generation, understand the sacrifices and the contributions that maybe that company had made in the past, whether it's Enterprise Rental Car, whether it's Boeing or any of these organizations that had a connection to World War II. Typically, they're the ones who are going to seek us out and say, we want to help you tell this story as well. Can you help us do that? And so we'll do all the research. We have an incredible archive that we're able to tap into that's internal, but we also don't hesitate to tap into other archives as well. Whether it's the National Archives or whether it's a local museum, whatever they may be, we will do it in order to be able to tell that story in the most compelling way. But to answer your question, it's fundraising activities, it's donations, it's sponsorships. We have both corporate, high net worth individuals that really want to be able to ensure that that the memory of their relatives, their friends are never forgotten. So all of that works. But in addition to that, we're working on other innovative ways that we can be able to generate revenue for ourselves as well. And ultimately, what we're looking for is those people who understand that, history may not repeat itself, but sure does rhyme sometimes, And so if you're able to kind of establish those connections for those organizations, for those people, typically that's what's going to resonate for them as well.
Gotcha. And that makes a lot of sense. So with the as I alluded to earlier, we all know, if you're watching this channel, you're probably a history person. So the 80th anniversary of the Normandy invasion is coming up. Does the foundation have any big plans?
We have a lot of plans. In fact, we're getting ready to head over there here in just about a little bit over a week. But as you said, Ben, 80th anniversary, 8 decades have passed since D-Day. And and I can remember when I was in Germany and Ronald Reagan was president. He was there to give his famous 40th anniversary talk over at Pointe du Hoc. Do you remember that? And it's incredible just to be able to watch him with all those veterans. Well, think about it this way. All those veterans now have passed.
Yes,
all
sir.
those veterans are on the podium with them, and so we've got a lot of planned anniversary events. We've already begun commemorating a lot of those things with special events, including screenings of our documentary films. We've got educational programs. on social media. If you go to any of our social media venues, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, you'll find that we were doing a countdown to the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and we're using these 5-minute clips of our longer documentaries. So they're kind of fun. If you don't have time to watch a 60-minute documentary, you can watch a 5-minute one, and so we're able to do that. We're also going to be sending back, with the help of New Day USA, we're funding one of our D-Day veterans who landed on Utah Beach. He's returning to Normandy this year as well. His name's Irving Locker. Incredible story. He landed on Utah Beach, fought his way through to the Battle of the Bulge, got all the way up to the kind of the outskirts of Berlin, liberated a concentration camp there. And oh, by the way, he's a Jewish veteran.
Oh my
So
gosh.
it's just an amazing story, and so we're trying to help send him back to Normandy for this trip. And for a lot of these guys, the 80th anniversary is maybe their last trip, and they know that, and they really want to go. So it's a lot of fun, to be able to see that. We also have we established the Dick Winters Leadership Monument right outside of Utah Beach, and we're going to be doing a wreath laying on June 4th. So for anybody that happens to be in Normandy on June 4th, definitely try to attend that, because it's always a very meaningful event. Anybody who watched Band of Brothers knows who Dick Winters is, and
Certainly. Now,
and
I'd heard, since you opened that door, so I'm going to walk,
yeah.
because I had heard that Major Winters was initially not excited about the idea because he did not want to be singled out, but he said if it was a small leaders monument, he could get behind it. Is there any truth to that?
No, it's totally true. And he definitely had his own criteria. He said, "Look, this is not about me." He said, "But if it helps other generations, and especially if it can honor and be able to commemorate the leadership of company grade officers, then I'll agree to it." And so we did that. Governor Tom Ridge was unveiled it and gave the keynote address at that. And today, to this day, it's still one of my favorite monuments to go visit, because it's kind of right there on the way to Utah Beach. You're almost at Utah Beach when you see that. And it's also, oh, by the way, right next to Breakcore Manor. You just
Yes,
have
sir.
to go up the road and around the corner. So, it tells a story as well.
I think one of the most interesting things about that monument is it helps people understand just how small a space the troops were fighting in initially. Because I've seen, like, I don't want to say uninformed because I don't want to sound like I'm snarky, but people will be like, well, what's the Dick Winters Monument doing so close to Utah Beach? They jumped in. They didn't land at Utah. I was like, yeah, they did jump in, but they jumped in specifically to secure those causeways. They were, yeah, within spitting distance of Utah Beach. And just
Uh,
having that little landmark there really tight, it's like a visual reference point that tightens into focus of just how small a box these guys are operating in for the first 72, 96 hours.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's and that's really, I think, the great value in establishing these memorials, these monuments in those locations, because they really kind of they tell that story, but they also kind of help kind of let you visualize where you're at and what happened then that you might not otherwise get. And you don't always have a tour guide when you're traveling through Normandy. So when you're able to go to one of those monuments help tell that story.
Yes, sir. So, final question I have here for you, and it's kind of getting back to the personal, but is there one spot, any World War II battlefield or in Normandy in particular, that really resonates with you personally?
There's so many, Ben, and I mean, I love Omaha Beach. I mean, I typically, and when I say Omaha Beach, I'm also saying including in that Normandy American Cemetery, because that was part of the battlefield. As you go up the bluffs, and typically what I will try to do when right when I arrive there is I'll try to go right when the Normandy American Cemetery opens, because at that point there's nobody else there. You're alone with your own thoughts. You're there with all those other veterans that sacrificed throughout the Normandy campaign. I mean, everybody talks about D-Day, but the Battle of Normandy went on for another 72 days.
Yes, sir.
So it was a long, hard fought battle that went all the way inland, and you get that you get that impression in a visceral way when you're walking through all of those crosses and stars of David. Oh, by the way, overlooking the Bay of the Sign, which is, you know, Omaha Beach right there, and so, and then going down on the beach itself and knowing that that bay is also a grave for all of those soldiers that were lost. It's very meaningful to me, and so I always try to make that my first stop whenever I visit.
That's actually a really beautiful sentiment, sir, in the grand sense of that term. Just because you're right, so many. I think it's the so many of us have a understanding of D-Day from selective reading or popular culture, you know, whether it's Saving Private Ryan or The Longest Day or, you know, whatever, you know, even Band of Brothers. But it's like, okay, airborne jumps in, then there's the amphibious assault, and then there's this furious fighting, and then now we're gonna jump to the 1st of August when Patton breaks out after Operation Cobra, and nobody's thinking about, as you said, that well, there's like 72 days of a lot of unpleasantness that went on that got us to that point.
And a lot of sacrifice that and it's just the stories that are just so powerful and so meaningful. And if you just, you know, and you know, too, when you're there at any of these cemeteries, doesn't matter if it's an American cemetery, British, Commonwealth, doesn't matter. You know, behind every one of those headstones, there's a story. You know, we just have to bother to get to know that story, and from those stories, you really kind of get a much fuller picture of what happened there.
Yes, sir. And we really appreciate the fact that the World War II Foundation is out there finding and telling those stories. And
Well, we appreciate you, Ben. Thank you.
well, we're looking forward to getting the word out. We're looking forward to September 10th to what was that particular documentary again? My Father's Secret War.
Yeah, Dad's Secret War,
That's
and you know, it's going to be a great one. And we actually just released Orador, the Village of Death, that you can I think it's just airing right now, which is also an incredibly powerful film that was just released. So look for that.
Yes, sir. So everybody who's listening in, we'll put a couple links down in the comments for y'all to check out what the World War II Foundation is doing. And again, my guest tonight has been retired Colonel, now Mr. John Fenzel, the CEO of the World War II Foundation, which is doing yeoman's work in bringing the story of the greatest generation to a new generation of students. So, John, thank you so much for being on the show tonight.
Thank you, Ben.
All right, you have a good evening.